Our guest today is Representative Paul Ryan, Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. His last visit here was in July of 2014. We appreciate his coming back. He showed an early interest in politics, working as a staffer for Senator Bob Caston while still in college at Miami University in Ohio. After graduation, he was a speechwriter for Jack Kemp and worked for Kemp's think tank. Kemp later told Washingtonian magazine that our guest's greatest strength was that he's an activist conservative, not a stick-in-the-mud conservative. While working on the Hill as a legislative director, he also moonlighted as a waiter and a fitness trainer, and in 1998, at age 28, was elected to Congress and became chairman of the Budget Committee in 2011. He was the Republican Party's vice presidential nominee in 2012 and named to lead the Ways and Means panel in November of 2014. Thus endeth the biographical portion of the program. Now on to the ever so compelling recitation of ground rules. As always, we're on the record here. Please no live blogging or tweeting, and short no filing of any kind while the breakfast is underway to give us time to actually listen to what our guest says. There's no embargo when the session ends. To help you curb that relentless selfie urge, we'll email several pictures of the session to all the reporters here as soon as the breakfast ends. And as regular attendees know, if you'd like to ask a question, please do the traditional thing and send me a subtle, non-threatening signal. We'll start off by offering our guests the opportunity to make some opening comments, then we'll move to questions around the table. With that, sir, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
How often do you guys do this?
As often as we can convince someone to come and join us.
So it's this not like every Thursday?
No, that would be too easy and predictable. So this week we've done 3. Really? Some weeks we do none, and I'm very nervous. So.
All right. I thought I'd start off with trade. I even brought some talking points, which I normally don't do. First off, Congress has actually been pretty productive this year. I know that's not something you guys like to say when you write about us. We've been fairly productive, and I see trade as another great opportunity to get something big done. The 2 trade agreements that we're looking at right now give us greater access to 1 billion customers. Let's never forget the fact that 95% of the world's consumers live in other countries, and for us to have faster economic growth, more jobs, and higher wages, we need to break down trade barriers, open up markets, write the rules, bring other countries up to our standards in order to get those kinds of jobs that we want and those wages that we want. So we need trade agreements that get us, help us tear down those barriers. Thank you. Chicken sausage. Yeah, all right, yeah. Good. Chicken sausage. And some clovers, too. So the real question right now before us is, are we going to write the rules of the global economy, or are we going to cede that job to China? That's question number 1. Question number 2, if you're standing still on trade, you are falling behind. Other countries are racing around the world getting preferential bilateral and multilateral agreements for their countries, and as a result, we lose. There have been 48 trade agreements since 2000 in Asia alone, and we've only been a party to 2 of them. And as a result, our share of trade in that region has gone down 42%. By 2030, there are going to be 3.2 billion people in the middle class in Asia. This is a perfect market for us. This is an opportunity for us. And in days of past, if you wanted to penetrate markets and sell your goods in those markets, you'd have to assemble or manufacture in those markets, set up a factory in those countries, meaning outsource. Well, if we get good trade agreements, we can make things here in America and send them there if we lower barriers. So this is an opportunity for us. Trade always involves anxiety. Trade is always difficult politically. There's never been a time that I can remember where trade has been easy. Nevertheless, it's the right thing to do. There's bipartisan support. It's going to require both parties to work together to get it done, which leads me to Trade Promotion Authority. In order to get a good trade agreement, you have to have a good Trade Promotion Authority. There is no way that our trade partners who are in negotiations with us are going to be willing to negotiate with 536 people to get a trade agreement. They want to be able to negotiate with one person. And the question for us in Congress is, how do we set this system up so that Congress is in the driver's seat along with the administration? And so the TPA bill that we have, which is bipartisan, which Ron Wyden, Orrin Hatch, and I negotiated, and we have bipartisan support in the House and the Senate for, we believe is the right balance because it empowers Congress. It empowers Congress by putting Congress in charge of the outcome. It empowers Congress by saying to the administration, here are the guidelines, here's what we want to see in a trade agreement, 150 guidelines. We want agreements that are high standard agreements that bring countries to our standards, so we're writing the rules of the global economy. We want agreements that open our markets up. We want agreements that protect our intellectual property, human rights. I can go on and on. Second thing is, in the past, there have been legitimate criticisms about trade agreements where, the public can't see what's in them, where Congress is not included. So we have opened this up. It's the most accountable, most transparent system and process that has ever occurred in this TPA. Members of Congress can get involved. Members of Congress can attend the negotiating rounds. Members of Congress can see the text as it's being developed. Oh, and also, when a trade agreement is in the completion phase, before a president can sign it and send it to Congress, it's got to be made public for 60 days so the public can see what's in a trade agreement. Then Congress considers it, and Congress decides whether it goes. And Congress decides whether or not the administration followed these procedures, stuck with the guidelines. And if Congress decides the administration did not follow the process as laid out by Congress, then Congress can turn TPA off for that particular trade agreement. So we think this is sort of the belts and suspenders approach to having, to empowering Congress, to having more transparency and accountability, and to give our trading partners the element of trust that they need, the confidence they need to put their best offers on the table to get the best agreements for our country. And so that's where we are right now in trade. And the last point I'd say is the geopolitical and national security arguments and benefits of this are immense. Ash Carter said it probably right, which is it's as good as having another aircraft carrier in the Pacific, in TPP in particular. We need trade to be engaging. Look, as a Republican, I got to tell you, I have lots of concerns about the president's foreign policy. I think it's a disaster. But in this area, he's going in the right direction. And so the last thing I want to do is have our fingerprints on a foreign policy failure. And the last thing I want the world to think is that our political system, the Republican and Democratic system, can't deliver on something we all agree on, which is opening up markets, writing the rules of the global economy, and having more trade. This is an opportunity to get growth in our economy that's badly needed. It's an opportunity to get more jobs, and it's an opportunity to write the rules of the global economy. It's an opportunity to keep America in a leadership role in the world, and to help prevent the narrative that we're somehow in some decline phase from sticking. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks for doing that. I'm going to ask one or two, then we're going to go to Cheryl Bowen, Michael Warren, Vicki Needham, Francine Kiefert, Lauren Fox, Casey Wooten, Margaret Talev, Doug Palmer, Lisa Mascaro, Kevin Hall, and Dave Shepardson.
Like 9 o'clock.
So eat quickly. So let me ask you, but you're sounding optimistic on trade and the reasons to do it. As you know, I believe you commented for it on a Politico story this morning that says there are up to 75 Republicans who could vote against TPA, and Steny Hoyer says Democratic support is somewhere in the 12 to 20 range. So you've said it's always been a heavy lift.
I've never said 75. I've never put numbers on
Okay, well then.
Maybe Politico probably. Did Sherman write that?
Yes. Okay. So, well, how would you assess the lift you have? Is it 75 of your colleagues you've got to convince?
I feel reasonably optimistic. I skimmed that article real quickly. I don't think it captures where we are. I don't think it's an accurate reflection of where we are. But I've said all along we're going to need Democrats. I mean, nowhere have we said that we can't do this. We're going to do this without Democrats. So we know we need Democrats. The president's going to have to deliver. And I don't think Democrats are going to want to see him fail on such a major issue. And Republicans, by and large, are for trade. And Republicans are naturally suspicious of this administration. But once Republicans see how much detail and attention we place on making sure that TPA is actually a way of constricting the administration and empowering Congress, then those arguments pretty much fade away. And so people are making arguments based on earlier versions of what they call fast track, and based on just sort of a reflexive concern about the Obama administration, which we all have because he's exceeding his powers in so many other areas. But it's among the reasons why TPA has done the way it does, where it empowers Congress, makes sure that no law can be changed at all in any way without Congress doing it. And so once people sort of realize these facts, we feel good. And so I think our members are getting to a very good place. Ted Cruz and I put an op-ed out in the Wall Street Journal, last Monday or something like that. So you're seeing lots of different Republicans talking about the benefits of trade and the need for TPA. So I believe we'll get there, but trade is always difficult. But by the way, nothing is easy these days in Congress. Nothing that has any big substance is easy to pass. So, you can take that article, change the headline to the other 5 or 6 bills that are coming down the pike, because nothing is easy.
Let me ask you about one other thing that's not easy, then we'll go to my colleagues. And that's tax reform. You said in February, quote, "My guess is tax reform is a 2015 thing for sure, and I think it's got to be done by the end of the summer." Do you still have that belief, or have you given up on tax reform until?
No, not at all. It's the same thing. Sorry, I'm eating with my mouthful. I'd say I'd stick to the same timeline. We're working on it actually right now. We're pretty much doing the research and the scoring that we need to do to see where common ground can be had. We realize it will be a limited tax reform, meaning it won't be a big comprehensive across the board because we have Obama. We want to do individual rates, but we see tax reform, full and comprehensive tax reform, as a 2017 project, but a down payment on that project in 2015 is very possible. And it's also a part of fixing our international rules, financing the Highway Trust Fund, and so that project is still well underway.
Cheryl?
Thanks.
From BNA.
To continue on the nothing is easy. One of the big priorities of the president this year is lifting sequestration. And there have been veto threats out. I understand that you're no longer budget chairman, but one of the solutions this year that the president keeps putting out is a Ryan Murray style negotiation. So do you see that coming together, and who would play your part?
Well, it's Enzi and Price. Price and Enzi, excuse me. We always go housework. Actually, I call it Murray Ryan because my niece, her name is Murray Ryan. So, isn't it? I think that's very viable and very possible. Again, remember the Murray Ryan formula. The Murray Ryan formula is you have to come up with mandatory offsets that exceed the discretionary add-backs, or the sequester relief, as you will. And so what Patty and I did was we had, I think, $85 billion in mandatory savings, and we had resulted in a little over $20 billion in net deficit reduction and some sequester relief. That's a good formula. The real fiscal pressure is on mandatory spending anyway. That's where the fiscal problems lie. And so anything we can do on the down payment on that. That's one of the reasons why I liked the Doc Fix bill, as imperfect as it was. It got a couple of really important entitlement reforms on Medicare, which give you good out-year savings, which helps us on a long-term problem, which gets really ugly down the road. And so if we can do anything on that front, I think that's a good thing. And so that's the formula that Patty and I produced, and there's absolutely a way to replicate it for another session here. And this is what budget chairs do.
Michael Warren, Weekly Standard.
I know it's difficult to evaluate a simple or a single provision of a tax reform proposal without looking at it holistically, but I want to ask you to do that anyway. Can you assess the merits and demerits of increasing a child tax credit as proposed by Mike Lee and Marco Rubio?
That's a pretty good. You want me to wait it? Let me finish my food here a second. I think it's great that people are putting tax reform bills out there. I want to encourage Republicans to put out their ideas on tax reform. There are a lot of good ideas out there. I don't want to get into debating the particulars of any one plan versus others. In my mind, growth is the ultimate goal for tax reform. because growth gets you upper mobility, growth gets you more wages, growth makes it easier for families to raise families. And so I don't want to get into whether they have their tax credit the right way versus rate reductions and all of that stuff.
Okay, but conceptually.
Yeah, see, I know where you're going. I just don't want to. I don't want to do anything to dissuade people from. As chairman of Ways and Means, what I don't want to do is dissuade people from putting ideas on the table for fear of getting criticized. I want people to put good ideas out there. I want people to put their plans out there, and I think we should have a good, robust debate about big tax reform. And I think that debate ought to occur sooner rather than later, like later in the year in 2016. And so I don't want to be critical of any aspect of anybody's plan because I want to encourage people to put plans out there.
Vicki Needham from the Hill.
Nice try.
All right. I maybe have an easier question on trade. I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit more about the process you're sort of expecting to happen. The two TPA bills are slightly different in each chamber.
No, we made them identical in markup.
What about Menendez?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that's slightly different.
But are you, when are you expecting to vote? I mean, you guys are out next week.
Well,
Will the Senate go first?
Yeah, so that's the plan, because their calendar is, God, it takes them so long to do anything. They're just when they get off Corker, then they get onto this, and I think Mitch is, today he's starting to file. I can't remember. So we're working with them. So our anticipation is that they go first, that they'll keep issues separate, like TAA and TPA. We will not conjoin them. We won't have this. We'll have separate votes on those policies. The Menendez amendment, I'm not sure that they understood the ramifications of knocking a country out of TPP. It's kind of hard to have a TPA arrangement where you sort of preemptively knock a country out of it. It doesn't really work that way. So the human trafficking issue is a very important issue, and that needs to be addressed. But knocking a country out of TPA when you're negotiating a multilateral trade agreement, I don't think works. So that has to be addressed in a different way, in my opinion.
Francine Kiefer from the Monitor.
Kind of philosophical question here. What was the point of doing a GOP-only budget when you know you're going to have to get it past Democrats? What was the point of that?
We got to do two things. We got to find common ground and get things done to move the ball forward and to advance our principles, if only incrementally, and show the country what we would do, what we believe, where we want to go, what our ultimate goals are. And so a budget is very important as an aspirational document to show that you have solutions to fix the country's problems that are very different than the progressives. And so that's really important. Plus a budget you need to pass just to get the plumbing and the functioning of Congress working, reconciliation, the 302A, which is to get the appropriations going. So it is hard for me to imagine that you can pass a macro budget document that's bipartisan where we all agree. I mean, look, I've worked on this for years. Democrats want a bigger government. They want to raise taxes. We don't. So we're not going to be able to agree on a macro budget vision because we have President Obama has never ever once even proposed to balance the budget. And he's resisted our attempts to ever balance the budget. So how are you going to get agreement on that? So that's why we pass our vision for what a budget ought to look like, how to balance the budget, how to pay down the debt without raising taxes, reform entitlements, all the things you need to do to actually get our debt crisis averted. But then after a budget is passed, then you can negotiate interim smaller measures to advance your principles, if only incrementally. And so to me, the two go hand in hand.
Lauren Fox from National Journal.
I want to turn to 2016. One of the things that has come up is the broad amount of candidates that there are. There could be upwards of 19 to 20. I'm curious what you think about that for the party. I'm not going to ask you to weigh in on who your favorite candidate is because I'm guessing you won't do that. But you can throw that in there if you'd like. But I just want to kind of get a sense of whether or not that's concerning at all. Do you think that the party needs to kind of nominate someone?
Well, I think the process will do that in due course. No, I don't think it's a bad thing at all that you have multiple candidates. I think we have high-quality candidates this time. I'm staying neutral because I'm running the presidential trust. I'm staying neutral because I don't want to get into this, the day-to-day campaign, stuff. And one of the reasons I didn't run is I wanted to focus on policy, getting things done, and that's what I'm doing. And so I don't really want to get involved in the day-to-day political intrigue stuff. But I think it's good. I think we have very high-quality candidates, and I think we'll get a good nominee that will emerge from the field. And because of the way sort of Reince restructured the system with, the debates, the way the primaries work, you'll have a nominee arrive in a timely basis, in a timely manner, I think, regardless of how many people go into it.
You suffering any twinges?
No, you're for not running?
Right.
No. I'm not one of those people who looks back at things like that. I think I can make a big difference as chairman of Ways and Means Committee, and I'm home on weekends. Our kids are 10, 11, and 13. So I can make a huge difference for the cause, for the country, for Wisconsin doing what I'm doing. And I'm a policy person, so I don't have to be the guy. And I look for, the role I see myself playing is helping prepare for governing in 2017, helping the party prepare an agenda to show the country in 2016, to run on in 2016, so that we can have a real choice-based election in 2016, so that we can have an affirming mandate election in 2016, so that we can govern in 2017 and fix this country's problems before they get out of our control. And that's the role that I enjoy playing. That's the role I want to help contribute to playing. And so I think I can help get us prepared as a party to lead if we have a Republican president in 2017.
Casey,
So there have been a few extenders bills trickling out of Ways and Means. There have been a few extenders bills sort of trickling out of Ways and Means this year, state and local R&D. Can we expect more of those? And will a permanent solution to all the extenders be a part of the limited tax reform?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So yeah, I think I'm trying to rack my brain. We likely will do some more bills out of committee. My goal is to avoid what happened last year, which is, on December 11th, people found out what the tax policy was going to be for 2 more weeks. I can't tell you how many farmers I've talked to about Section 179. They're going to make a big purchase, like a $250,000, Case Magnum or something like that. And they have from December 11th to December 31st to make the decision. I mean, that was ridiculous. And so all along, we wanted to show where we're going, what we want to do to help add to certainty, because we have this uncertainty problem. And so, yes, I do believe extenders can be either part of a limited tax reform package this summer, or if that doesn't, if we just can't come together with the administration on that, then we immediately move to extenders and do those as early in the fall as possible, so we can give people time to prepare and plan. So sooner rather than later, as far as I'm concerned. And we're pretty clear about what we think should be permanent.
Thanks. Typing slowly to make sure I get the tax extenders as early as this summer and perhaps by fall.
Yeah.
So I want to actually want to ask you a 2016 question too, but I would be remiss if I didn't quickly do some highway bill infrastructure stuff. How's it going to be linked to the tax reform push? And realistically, what are the prospects for getting something done? And I know we're supposed to do one. I just want to toss in a quick Hillary question.
Wait, what was the last part?
I was just saying, I'm prefacing my second question. Are you surprised or not at all surprised that Hillary hasn't been a little more specific on trade, and what would you like her to do?
that seems like a treat, but
I'm going to leave that one. Yeah, it's not I'm not going to tell Hillary Clinton what to do. I don't think she'd listen anyway. Something tells me. So on tax reform and highways, the only way repatriation works is if it is part of permanent reform, going from a worldwide system to a more internationally competitive exemption system. Repatriation does not work, and we will not do a holiday or some kind of temporary deemer. You know what I mean when I say that, where you just deem all this income repatriated without reforming the actual system. Because if you were to do that, you'll just send countries to the exits, and they will say, I'm getting out of here. I'm inverting, or I'm going to get taken over by a foreign company. The trend of inversions and the trend of foreign acquisitions of U.S. companies because of tax differences is a trend that is increasing and concerning to us. And so there is a sense of urgency to fix our international rules. And so the repatriation works only if it is in reforming our international rules. And so we have to exhaust the possibility that we can do that with the administration. And if we can't, then we'll go to Plan B, which is to put together a pay-for package for a multi-year highway bill. In the meantime, we're going to have to do an extension of the Highway Trust Fund before the end of May so that we can buy ourselves the time we need to try and put this together.
We're going to go to Doug Commerce in Florida.
Hi, Chairman Ryan. I had a question about one of the other trade bills that was passed by the committee. The finance version of the customs bill contains a currency amendment that was offered by Senator Schumer. That didn't come up in the Ways and Means Committee. I just wondered, do you think that when you get to the floor debate, are you expecting that there'll be a currency amendment that'll be allowed to be offered?
In TPA?
No, on the customs bill.
I don't know. I haven't really thought about that. So customs, we're going to have a conference committee on customs, and customs is one of those bills where we have just a lot of differences, and I expect a lively conference committee on customs. And there are aspects of I'm not talking about the Schumer thing, but aspects of the Senate bill that we like, and there are aspects of our bill approach that we like. So you're going to see an effort to meld the two approaches between the House and the Senate on customs, and that's going to take a conference committee to do that. Well, is it the Schumer enforceable currency? I forget. Yeah, see, I mean, I obviously don't support that. I think that would be a big mistake. I don't think it's in our interest. I think it would further compromise our status as a world reserve currency. I think currency manipulation is real. It's occurring, and there are better, more effective ways of addressing it than having tariff retaliations, which I think could also compromise our own monetary policy. If you add it to a trade agreement, you're killing a trade agreement. If you add it to customs, that we're just going to have to hammer it out in conference.
Lisa Mascaro.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't talked to Pete Sessions. I don't know the answer to the question.
Lisa from the LA Times.
I was wondering if you could wax philosophical just a bit on tax reform and talk a little bit about the sort of historic Republican pursuit for lower individual rates. Is that still sort of a top priority, or do you think that time has waned?
No.
And can you give us a sense of your...
I was up for philosophy, yeah.
Maybe you could wax a little more on it. But also, do you think that your plan will try to push down to the 20s? Is that sort of what you're aiming at?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, our tax rates are way too high in this country. It's putting us at an enormous competitive disadvantage in the world. The president loves high tax rates on individuals, which is a job killer. It's a growth killer. It's a wage killer. It hurts small businesses. So it's pretty clear to us in this administration we're not going to get the kind of tax reform we ultimately want to get, which was something we hope to achieve in the next session of Congress in the post-Obama world. Which is the complication we have right now. We will not leave small businesses on the sidelines, even if we do a minimum of a phase one package. So we don't want to do something that we think disadvantages small businesses. 8 out of 10 businesses in America pay their taxes as individuals. They're pass-throughs. They're sub-S's, LLCs, partnerships, sole proprietors. And we want to make sure that whatever it is we do does not put them in any kind of disadvantage. It puts them in a system where they're even more disadvantaged. Right now, there's a difference in rates to begin with. So we're trying to figure out what kind of interim tax reform we can do to address these international problems I just discussed and help all businesses no matter how they're structured.
Do you think the Rubio plan at 35% for top rates doesn't go far enough?
Did you team up the Weekly Standard on the... Look, my budgets, I've written, 8 budgets or something like that? The top rate that I'm hoping to get to is 25%. I'll just put it that way.
Kevin Hall from McClatchy.
Yeah, 2 questions. I want to follow up to your last time here. The first one, Senator Corker's ended his opposition, but he raised points that in the past Republicans have raised about budget gimmicks and pushing stuff into future cuts. I wonder if you could weigh in on the specifics.
On chimps?
Chimps and the concept of shifting defense spending to contingency funding, and whether that's not the smoke and mirrors you guys promised to get rid of. But wait, the second question, Mr. Chairman, when you were here in February, I asked about the problems that Governor Brownback is having implementing kind of the Arthur Laffer model. You said you weren't too familiar with it. It's been pretty well written about. The Washington Post had a very thorough piece fairly recently about all the candidates kissing the ring of Mr. Laffer. Has this changed your view of it?
The napkin of Mr. Laffer.
Have you?
Kind of a supply side joke there, sorry. I think it was right over here where he did it. Wasn't that Old Ebbitt where he did that? Yeah. Wasn't it? Yeah. So we all know, I mean, there's like two conservatives. We know Art pretty. I've known Art half my life. He's a good friend. He's a great guy. I have his curve framed on my wall that he wrote and signed. So, look, I can't speak to what Sam's a good friend of mine. Sam's budget issues were. So I wouldn't, and I think to talk about the effects of marginal rates at a state level versus a federal level, I think are kind of an apples to orange thing to do. Do I believe that low rates helps create faster economic growth and more jobs? Yes. Where are we on the prohibitive range of the Laffer curve? No one knows the answer to that question, and there are plenty of academics who will debate where on the prohibitive range. What I know that is new than when Art did his curve in the 70s or early 80s is that we're in a global economy now where we have far more mobile capital than ever before, and so tax rates matter even more today than they did back in the 20th century. The 20th century, we are the undisputed economic leading superpower in the free world, and so it didn't matter as much where our tax rates were vis-a-vis capital mobility. Well, it sure as heck does now. And the international industrial average tax rate on businesses is 25%, and our corporate rate's 35%, and our effective top individual rate, which is what the pass-throughs end up paying, is 44.6%. That is killing us. And so I would argue that prohibitive range, because of mobile capital mobility, is moved down the curve. And so whether a state government did this or that, I think is just is not capturing the full picture of the fact that we have to be competitive on our rates. I can tell you so many stories of Wisconsin manufacturers who are sub-S's who compete against Canadian manufacturers, and the Canadians tax their businesses at the federal level at 15%, and we're as high as 44.6%. You throw the Wisconsin income tax on that, we're over 50%. It makes a difference. And so I think Arthur is more right now than he was back those days because of our international competitiveness issues. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I can get going.
Mr. Shepardson from...
Obviously, the U.S. auto companies have been very aggressive in trying to convince you and others about enforceable currency. Do you see their...
I think one company. I don't know if all three are in the same position, but you'd have to ask them that.
Well, through their trade association, they are.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see any compromise here, any way that Congress would give them half a loaf on this?
Oh, sure. I think we've done that in our TPA. It's a primary negotiating objective for the first time ever. So let me just say, manipulation occurs, and manipulation is bad, and it's wrong, and we need to have the greatest flexibility, the best tools to go do something about it. The renminbi's up 30%. Treasury has not done nothing. I mean, this is weird, but I'll defend Jack Lew. He has done a lot on this front. There is a process at the IMF, Chapter 4, that one can go through and that we can use. And there's a lot America can do. My concern, ultimately, I want sound money. And ultimately, I want America to maintain this enormous privilege and advantage as being in control of the world currency system and maintain the dollar as the reserve currency. And there's always chatter about replacing it from other countries that have their own aims and ambitions, or even going to some synthetic currency unit at the IMF. The last thing I want to do is embrace policies that may lead to that by putting, beggar thy neighbor currency and tariff wars on the dollar-denominated system. And so where I understand a car company has problems, and they're legitimate problems that they have, there are better ways of addressing those problems than compromising the dollar-denominated world reserve currency system, which I think this would do, or wiping out the benefits of trade agreements. Because, by the way, it's not as if it's going to the retaliation usually hits other industries. They usually retaliate against somebody, some other sector than the one that's in play here. And so I don't think we want to be the ones, like in the early 20th century, to lead off on tariff wars and countervailing duties. I think the goal here is to get fair trade deals to lower barriers and increase our access to markets while doing smarter other things to deal with currency manipulation.
Mr. Gissing from Newsmax.
Thank you, Dave. Mr. Chairman, some within the Republican Party have said that TPA and TIPP will have an effect on U.S. immigration law.
Not at all.
Possibly change them. Well, I was going to say, would you respond to that?
Absolutely not. It's the latest urban legend. I find they pop up, urban legends, we knock them down. Bob Goodlatte's putting out a dear colleague, I think today, knocking this down, saying this is absolutely not the case. I've seen some things written. It is absolutely false. There's no way we would sign off on putting immigration legislation or immigration reform in TPA or a trade agreement. And we are unified on that as Republicans, and it is really sort of an urban legend of the day. Goodlatte's put something out there. Others have put some very declarative statements on there that this is not involved.
So there will be no immigration language?
Correct. Correct.
Nothing.
Correct. The way we wrote TPA is to make it strictly trade and not immigration. And so yes, there will be no immigration language in TPA.
Mr. Malero.
If we can go back to the Highway Trust Fund, if you're not going to raise the gas tax, how are you going to fund the short-term extension, and when will you present that? And also, how would you fund a long-term, multi-year plan that your colleagues in the House and Senate and the Transportation Panel say they want?
Yeah, so I'll give you the answer to your question in about 3 weeks, because I don't have it right now. Yeah, now I'm familiar with the deadline. We're working on that right now. We're running numbers, getting scores, and talking with our colleagues. Ron, Orrin, and Sandy and I are just beginning to figure out this together. That's Wyden, Levin, and Hatch, sorry. To figure out the short-term patch. Takes about $10 billion to get us through the year. We don't need that calendar space for tax reasons, but I believe Schuster thinks that you need to get it through the year for road construction planning reasons. So we'll do a patch through the year, I believe. That's the current plan. This can change for planning purposes. But we don't need all that time. Like I said, on tax reform, we just need the summer. And then we've got to come up with $10 billion, which we're working on right now, by the end of the month. If we want to do it through the calendar year, through December 31st. If we don't get repatriation, because we don't get a tax reform package, then we're going to have to do something like MAP 21 times 3. MAP 21 was a 2-year deal. Our goal is to get a 6-year bill, and so we'll have to put together a combination of pay-fors to fill the gap. And that's what we're working on that while we work on tax reform. So we're simultaneously trying to put together these packages. We're not going to raise gas taxes. Yeah.
Mr. Ryan.
Chairman Ryan, I was wondering.
Is that Alan Oden?
Yeah. You were I've been thinking about, for some reason, about the Republican chairman term limits. And you and every chairman, the new chairman has 6 years.
Yeah.
And how does that, first of all, do you think they've been good?
Yes. Oh, are you kidding me?
And what's the advantage, but also what's the disadvantage?
Yes, I think they're good.
What's the advantage and disadvantage of having that sort of timing?
Let me give you an example. He'll probably hate the fact that I say this.
Dave Camp, ran up against it, couldn't finish his thing.
Oh.
And I assume you're going to pick up his plan as your limited reform.
Well, we're starting with a paper that looks like this on tax reform, a new one. But I think term limits are fantastic. I think they're helpful. They're good. They keep things moving. Let me give you an example, Alan. Joe Crowley and I came to Congress together in 1998 election. Joe Crowley is one of the more junior members of the Ways and Means Committee. I think he sits one seat to the left of Sanchez, meaning he's like the second or third most junior person on the committee, and this is my second chairmanship. Just give you an example of the difference between term limits in the Republican caucus and the lack of term limits in the Democratic caucus. I mean, it's amazing. And so I think it's a very good thing because I think it gets talent churning through the system. It encourages people to stay in the House. I passed on 2 or 3 Senate races. Craig Gilbert can give you the story on that. I passed on 2 or 3 Senate races in Wisconsin because I saw the chance to be a committee chair at a relatively young age in the House where I could make a big difference earlier on and I have to stay in Congress for a lifetime. So term limits is a really good thing, and I'll defend them to the end in our caucus.
Speaking of Craig Gilbert.
You mentioned earlier your fundraising for the party, and obviously you were on the ticket. Last time you kind of saw how the campaign finance system worked from the inside. Do you have any concerns at all about what's happening this cycle? I mean, the candidates and de facto candidates are raising more and more money outside the hard money system, outside the contribution limits. Looks like they're going to be outsourcing more and more of their campaigns to companies that can raise money in massive chunks. Any concerns about the role of a handful of really deep pocket donors? Any concerns about it in terms of public perception of the system, in terms of its influence on people in the party, on candidates?
That's a good question. I haven't given it the kind of thought to give you a really thoughtful answer to it. The mistake would be to say we need public financing. The mistake would be to ask hardworking taxpayers to finance politicians' campaigns. That would be a mistake. I think it's important to put in perspective advertising or spending on campaigns versus advertising in America. I think George Will runs these numbers. They spend more money on advertising candy at Halloween than we do. I can't remember how he says it, but so I think it's important to put this all in perspective. And I think it's really important to put in perspective the need to protect free speech. And I think the Supreme Court was right about free speech in Citizens United. I get a lot. I just did a bunch of town halls, and this came up. There's somebody sending postcards out there saying undo Citizens United, do a constitutional amendment, have all donations disclosed for C4s and private advocacy and charitable groups, which to me means more intimidation of donors of people who want to exercise their free speech rights. So I see an attempt to infringe upon First Amendment rights, to give some people more tools to harass citizens from participating in democracy and expressing themselves. And I don't think that's a good thing. Look, I watched the IRS leak the donors of a cause to the opponents of the cause, and then have absolute harassment of those people, putting a chilling effect on a person's right to participate in democracy and to exercise their free speech rights. And so I think we have to be concerned about the efforts to intimidate people from participating and exercising their free speech rights. And I think that is a very big concern these days. So the last thing you want to do is knee-jerk, overreact, and put a chilling effect on free speech rights.
But do you think there's any cost associated with kind of the way the system works now?
Yeah, there's no. I mean, we're in the McCain-Feingold system. You don't think it's working well?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's obviously a couple different ways to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate goal here, Craig, is money's always going to follow power. So why don't we decentralize power out of Washington? You know, money is always going to try and influence power. You're always going to have cronyism. Big government leads to a government that is corruptible or corrupt. And so let's limit and restrict the power in government and send it back to people in the states, you know, so that we can decentralize power and decentralize the role of money in influencing public policy. That, to me, is the real answer.
John McKinnon from the Wall Street Journal.
One of the problems with comprehensive tax reform has always been there was a great disagreement between the parties on how much or whether to raise money. Prove this. If you do some sort of limited reform, aren't you going to run into the same problem?
Yeah, just to a limited extent. You know, I mean, you know, yes, it depends on how much fiscal space you had to do whatever policy you want. And so there is a math side to this that is a little bit of a zero-sum game, even after using macroeconomic scoring and using what I call a realistic revenue target, a current policy revenue target, which I think is reality. Even with those two things, which we do now, which we in Ways and Means in the House do, there is still a give and take. Base broadening must occur to get rates down. So yeah, you will have to have base broadening in any package that lowers rates. And if we do something on rates or effective rates this summer, you have to have base broadening. Yes. And that's why tax reform's hard.
Is the package going to raise revenue?
No, I mean, no, we're not going to. The goal here is to get a better tax system to grow the economy. The goal here is not to raise taxes on hardworking taxpayers to fund more government spending.
Brian?
On tax reform, what exactly do you think you can give small businesses who feel like they can't get a fair shake without dealing with the individual rate?
We're working on that, Brian. You wouldn't be failing if you didn't ask me, but I'm just kidding. It's an endearing comment. No, really, I've known Brian a long time. We're looking at all the different options that are out there, and we're trying to find a way of lowering the burden of tax on businesses so that they can be more competitive, irrespective of how they're formed, whether they be a pass-through or a C-corp. And so we're actually canvassing small businesses and small business groups and accounting experts and tax experts for those ideas. And so we're still in that idea gathering phase right now and scorekeeping phase. I'm still waiting for a lot of scores.
Dennis Strauss from Talking Points Memo.
So I wanted to follow up on the super PAC and campaign financing question. It just seems right now that there is a significant difference between like a former governor who's likely to run for president who can raise way more money than someone who's in elected office. And this may be the McCain-Feingold era, but it just seems to me that that is a significant difference, and it's something that...
between a person out of office and a person in office? Oh. You know, to be honest, I'm not as familiar with the differences, so I don't think I can give you an intelligent comment on that. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, a state person can't take their state money and fold it into a federal account. A federal person can fold the money into a federal account, but if you're not even in office, that probably does give you a pretty big advantage over everybody else. Yeah. I haven't really given a lot of thought to that.
Emma?
I wish I could. I mean, I know where you're going, but I don't.
Yeah, it's just sort of like there's this big. It seems like there's a big question right now, both among Republicans and thinking about facing Hillary Clinton in the general election, where the Clinton campaign is saying they're going to raise $1.25 billion, and so any serious Republican candidate has to think about that and has to make sure that they are in favor of these super wealthy donors. It doesn't seem that that is a motivator for laying out your policy proposals and giving the hard decisions.
Well, I'll give you the way I approach these things, and I've always approached these things, whether it's a person giving me $25 at a pig roast or anybody else. Here's who I am. This is what I believe. These are my policies. If you like them, I'd love your support. If you don't, then don't support me. That, to me, is the way you should conduct yourself as either an elected official or an aspiring elected official. That's how it ought to be, and that's how I do it. I've had plenty of disagreements with people who want to initially support me, but because I don't agree with them, then I don't agree with them. So just be yourself, and don't be somebody else's person. Be your person. That's what leaders do. One of the things that I do in heading up this presidential trust is we're trying to prepare for the general election at the RNC so much more than we ever had before, because the lessons we learned in 2012. We were running against an incumbent then. Hillary, you could say, is a de facto incumbent, and so for the reasons you just cited. And so what I'm trying to do with Reince is build a general election campaign pre-nominee so that it's already built by the time the person arrives in the nomination, so that they can get kind of a turnkey operation to be competitive with Hillary, who's effectively an incumbent from an electoral standpoint and or a campaign advantage standpoint. And so that's one of the things I'm working on at the party with Reince, because we see her getting a huge head start, just like Obama had a massive head start on Mitt. And so we're trying to do everything we can at the party to minimize that delta. To your point, every candidate, a good candidate who is a person worthy of becoming president, is a person who should say, "This is who I am. This is what I believe. And if you agree with me, I'd love your support. If you don't, then you might want to go find somebody else." And not like, "What do you want me to be?" and then be that person. That's not a person that should become president.
Emma?
Yes, from Reuters. Just on the currency amendment, there was also a third amendment that was moved in the Senate committee and passed, the Bennett amendment.
Yeah, what did that one do? I've heard of this. I apologize. I'm so focused on the House right now. What did that one do exactly?
I mean, you could cut, for example, a country which manipulated its currency out of a future trade agreement, and the administration supports it. It's in the customs bill. It doesn't involve duties. Right. It doesn't involve the TPA. I mean, would that be a compromise that maybe you could support?
Sure. I'm open to dealing with this issue in customs, not in TPA, because I don't want it to derail trade agreements. And to my earlier answer over here, we just have to be careful how we do this so that we don't end up shooting ourselves in the foot, and so that we don't end up triggering beggar thy neighbor, currency, and tariff wars down the road. We got to be careful about that. And look, we have a lot of QE out there, not just us, everybody. And when we end up normalizing our policy in central banks around the world, we're going to be entering uncharted territory. I think we should have started normalizing yesterday, not whenever they do. They're crushing savers. I mean, I can go on and on about monetary policy, but we're entering uncharted territory on monetary policy internationally, and we need to be careful that we don't add laws that could exacerbate unforeseen problems. So I'm willing to take a look at, in the customs bill, how do we more effectively address currency manipulation, because it is a problem. But I just want to make sure that we do it in a way that it doesn't end up hurting us.
Can I ask you quickly about Baltimore, sir? The budget that the Republicans agreed on yesterday cuts a lot of domestic spending over a 10-year period. You were talking earlier about governments. One of the key differences between the two parties is the government spends too much, in your view. Watching what's unfolded in Baltimore and people talking about the need for greater investment in housing and health and education in urban centers, what would be your prescription, if any, for the federal role dealing with the problems we've seen?
Yeah. Just because we're for limited government as Republicans doesn't mean we're for no government. We're for effective government, limited but effective government. And we need to change our poverty fighting metrics from measuring success based on inputs, effort, spending, programs, to outcomes, to results. Are we actually getting people out of poverty? To evidence on what works. Patty Murray and I have a bill we just introduced, which we're moving to get us toward evidence-based policymaking because, look, we just did 50 years in a war on poverty. We spent trillions of dollars, and we still have 45 million people living in poverty. Deep poverty is among the highest on record. And so we can't keep measuring success by how much money are we throwing at programs. We have to measure success at, like, is it working? Are we getting people out of poverty? And so, I put a lot of policy on this. With respect to Baltimore, we need to get in communities and engage and listen and learn. And from that, I think we can collaborate with people to deal with their legitimate anxieties. Look, I just put out, I didn't put out, go to opportunitylives.com and watch the Comeback miniseries, something I was involved in that I find so inspiring. These are stories about redemption in poor communities, about people who turn their lives around, and about the heroes who are out there in places like Baltimore who are beating the odds, getting out of poverty, and helping others do the same, and turning their lives around after having problems in their lives. And these are the kinds of stories that we need to uplift and do more of. And there are people who are hurting in poor communities. There are people who have real legitimate anxieties that need to be attended to. And I think the way to start is by listening and going and attending and being there. And as far as police, I think more community engagement is really important so that you can preempt these problems from occurring in the first place. What I'm hoping to do at Ways and Means, we have lots of hearings planned in our Human Resources Subcommittee that Charles Bustani's leading, is to really dig in and investigate better effective strategies at combating poverty, at restoring upward mobility, at going with what works, and by respecting people who are on the ground doing the grassroots poverty fighting in a really effective, cost-effective way too, and what we can do to support that. We need to do another round of welfare reform, not as an exercise to save money, but as an exercise to save lives and to get people from welfare to work into lives of opportunity and upward mobility, because there are too many people in this country who don't think the American idea is ever there for them again, and that's a tragedy. Bob Putnam writes, I can go on and on, but Bob, he's written some really interesting things, exciting work. It raises the hair on the back of your neck. We've got to get on this. And this does not have to be a Republican-Democrat thing. It really shouldn't be. If there's anything I learned from Jack Kemp, it's that there is so much untapped potential in this country among our nation's poor that we need to help figure out how to tap that potential, team up, partner, collaborate, and what I would call have a bottom-up, organic, grassroots poverty-fighting strategies, because this top-down, one-size-fits-all, bureaucratized approach isn't working.
We've got about 2 minutes left. Anybody who hasn't had one, who wants one? Yes, sir.
Yes, a question about trade. I noticed the Republicans in the Ways and Means Committee voted for the TPA bill 100%.
Yes.
And killed pretty much every amendment.
Kill is not the word I would choose to defeat it. I don't know.
Dispatched every amendment. We can't expect that from the House floor. There's a lot of suspicion. It's this kind of immigration urban legend.
That is an urban legend, just so you know.
To use your term, there's a lot of suspicion in the broader House. A lot of people on record against TPA. What is the answer? Do you have a vote and see how it goes? Do you wait until a significant bipartisan group has emerged? And how do you define bipartisan that would give leadership the ability to bring it to the floor of the House?
First, we're going to pass TPA. Second, like we've said all along, it's going to require Democrats to help. And it's going to be, I'm not kidding. I'm not a whip guy. I can't tell you the numbers. It's just not what I do. It's going to be, and the vast majority of Republicans support trade, And when they understand how this TPA is so different than prior ones, how it empowers Congress, puts constrictions on the administration, and reserves our constitutional prerogatives, preserves our constitutional prerogatives. When Republicans understand the contents of this, conservatives understand the contents of this, they're supportive of it. And so a lot of it is sort of an education of the actual particulars, and knocking down the urban legends, and knocking down the arguments on past versions of TPA which do not resemble this version.
Education like a summer course or a crash course or a next semester kind of thing?
Yeah, we're just going to text it to each other. That's pretty good. Summer course. We sit around tables like this and discuss it constantly, these issues. We have various ways. We have meetings. We're putting out a little bit of paper from Ways and Means. Have you noticed that by chance? You know, we put out a lot of stuff out of Ways and Means to engage with our members, and we do a lot of meetings with our members just to walk them through the bill.
I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. I want to thank Brendan and Kevin for helping us set it up. Thanks
Sure.
so much.
Yeah, you bet.
Appreciate it.